Rav Cardozo, you've been involved in education for many, many years, teaching, lecturing all around the world, to Jews, non-Jews, religious, secular, reform, conservative. So I want to ask you a question about education. On the one hand, people often criticize religious education as being indoctrination and brainwashing. On the other hand, in your own writings, you've talked about the coldness of the academic world and how they try and play it too neutral and just try and, give you facts here and there, but not actually give you strong beliefs. So my question is, should a teacher be very passionate and inspiring to their students and try and actually give them an ideology that the teacher believes in? Or on the other hand, should a teacher try and be more neutral and just give you different ideas and let the student pick themselves?
Yeah, this is a problem that all teachers are confronted with, including myself. First of all, I have learned over the last few years that the neutrality of the professors in the different universities, including in Israel, is not so neutral as I thought it was, or I had at the time when I went to university in Holland. There is a lot of brainwashing going on in the universities by professors, especially when it comes to Israeli politics. The truth obviously is that there cannot be objective education. We are human beings with emotions. Every professor, every rabbi has his ideas, and that will always come through in his lectures. Even as somebody wrote a book about, when you teach mathematics, there is an emotional side to it which influences mathematics. We didn't know that, but it has become clear that that is the case. And even the outcome of mathematics is therefore depending on human emotional feelings at the time when you teach it or when you are busy with that. The only thing what you can do, and which is one thing which I try to do, I don't know how successful I am, is to show as many as possible different points of view. I think that we owe our students. You can say, okay, my feeling is like this, or you push this a little bit more, but you have the absolute obligation to show your students that there also is an other side to the discussion, which completely disagrees with what you have to say yourself or you feel about. If you don't do that, you are definitely busy indoctrinating people. But total objectivity doesn't exist, not in the yeshiva world and also not in the university world. There is an American author, I think he's an American, non-Jew, who wrote an interesting book about this. He's called Walker Percy. And Walker Percy writes about a very interesting case. As an example, he says, imagine a young man is walking on the seashore and he finds a little dead dogfish lying there. And he takes his knife and he opens up the dogfish to see the anatomy of this dogfish from inside. And he draws conclusions according to what he saw. The same dogfish also appears in Harvard University or in a high school in America, where there is a teacher who will teach his students how to open up the dogfish and to have a look to see how the anatomy works. What is happening here? So Walker Percy says, both these people, the young man at the seashore and the one in the university or in high school, they basically see totally two different kinds of fishes. Why? Because one does it his own way. He hasn't got the sophistication to know exactly how to do that, but because of that he sees things which the fellow in the high school doesn't see. And the other way around as well. Or he gives the other example, somebody finds a piece of Shakespeare's Hamlet somewhere lying around. He starts to sit on a stone and he starts to read. How does he read Shakespeare? He reads Shakespeare his way and he draws the conclusions that way. The same piece of Shakespeare is taught in Harvard, And there is a Harvard professor of English literature who is also teaching Shakespeare. And what you will find is that there are two totally different Shakespeares. It's the same text, but the text has completely different meaning. So he says there is no such thing as objective ways of understanding these kind of things. So his solution is, so he asks the question, what shall we do? So Walker Percy says, what we need to do is, we have to take the fellow who is walking on the seashore and bring him into the classroom in Harvard, sometimes, and to take all the chevre of Harvard and bring them to the seashore. Because only when they see two sides, they have a better chance of understanding what is going on. And I think that is extremely valuable. I add an also important word here. I've written about this also. I believe that a good yeshiva, and there are only a very few of them, I don't know if they did something like that in Rav Shagar, his yeshiva. I would bring in, only for the good students who have learned a lot, an apikores, and an heretic who will challenge them on everything they believe, and then to see how they react. If they don't know how to answer the man, how good was their Jewish education? And therefore, it would be very worthwhile doing that. If I would ever start a yeshiva, I would do this. Obviously, the students have to be mature. They must know how to do this. And afterwards, they would have to sit down and look and discuss among themselves what the apikores, what the heretic said. How are we actually answering this apikores, this heretic? If we don't know how to answer it, so how deep is our belief? Because what the apikores really does, what the heretic really does, is he deepens out my beliefs by challenging it. And when you challenge something, then there is a chance that you actually understand what you are believing. But I would do the same thing in a university. And that is to bring a very deeply religious person to the university and teach a class which is busy with atheism and non-belief, and make him to challenge the non-believers. In other words, it should happen in both cases. As far as I know, it doesn't happen anywhere. I haven't heard yet about it, but I may be wrong about it. But that's one thing I would definitely be very much in favor of. I add to that one more thing, and that is this. You cannot inherit religiosity. You can have a religious education from your parents, from school, but on the end of the day, you have to discover it on your own. I think that is what the Hasidic world basically is teaching us. You can't take this from your parents, and therefore it is important that you have to discover why you are religious, not because why your parents were religious, right? Se keli ve'anvehu. In other words, first of all, it has to be my God, and then afterwards I can speak about the God of my parents. That is very, very important. And the same thing is true about secularism. If you are just secular because your parents were secular and therefore you just continue in that tradition, what kind of secularism is this? Or you first of all try religion, and then after you've tried it and you've experienced it, then you reject it, then there is something to say for that. And I appreciate that. But if you are just coming out of an irreligious secular background and you just continue to live like that, what kind of person are you? That is, to me, the same problem which the religious person has got. It goes both ways. I've been reading lately, perhaps you have also, several books written by Hasidim, mainly in America, who walked out on the Hasidic community and became secular. And they were well written. Some men and some women who wrote these books. The interesting thing is that while they tell about their pain, which they experience while living in these very, closed Hasidic communities, which did not know how to deal with a young man who couldn't live by that, or a young woman who could not live by that, I never have seen in any of these books, and I read quite a few of them now, and they became bestsellers, where anybody says what really the reason was why they gave up on religion. All what they do is telling the story of what happened to them and how terrible it and how painful it is, which I'm sure it was. But they became completely secular. I would straight away ask them, why did you not try for another kind of Judaism? Why did you become secular? Did you try reform? Did you try conservative Judaism or modern orthodoxy? They don't do this. And that is to me a very big question mark, because then it means to say that even so I understand their pain, the reason why they reject the Jewish tradition doesn't hold. Why not? I don't hear any good arguments. And that makes the whole thing a little bit problematic.